Okay. So,
Here we are.
yep, we're just welcoming in the attendees. We are up to 34. I would just love to welcome you all in as you come into the webinar to drop into the chat box where you're from and your name, if you'd like to.
What you're passionate about.
Yeah, feel free to share any.
Oh, we've got Howard here. I remember Howard from Hamilton. He came and did your gardening masterclass, I think, if that's the same Howard. Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. We're up to 63. From Sydney, from Masterton. Hi, Joe. Hi, Josh and Morgan. Lachlan from Tauranga. Janine and Alexandra. No, from Alexandra. Amber from Hawke's Bay. Hi, Kevin from Martin. Robin from Palmy. Otaki. Whakatane, Christchurch. Vanessa from Kirikiri. Yeah, all over New Zealand. Epic. Kath from Mangaweka, sorry. Awesome. We'll just give it a minute or so for everyone to come in. We're up to 70. Ros from Queensland. And we're very lucky to have Dan here, who's just been on a 7-month-long global tour. We were lucky to pull this together in such short notice, but here we are. Bob from Wairoa. Yay! Hi, Bob. Awesome. Everyone's coming in. Just give it another minute. Welcome. Sue from Tamaki. Auckland. Vanessa from Whiritoa. Oh, yep. Philip from Victoria, Australia. Beautiful. Cool. Okay, so just as everyone comes in, we have everyone's still coming in. We're up to nearly 100. A little bit of an intro and some housekeeping to do. So, welcome everybody who's still coming in. Thank you all so much for being here. We are very excited to have this conversation today and to be welcoming everybody in and having this conversation together. So yeah, thank you all for being here. This is very awesome. So just a little bit of housekeeping. As you all come in, we really want to encourage the use of the chat box. So if you all want to chat amongst each other or have comments about some of the wisdom and knowledge and conversations that happen over the next 2 hours, definitely weave conversations together through the chat box. And if you have any specific questions for the speakers or for me, chuck them in the Q&A box so that when we have the Q&A at the end, the questions specifically for the Q&A don't get lost in the chat box. So that would be fantastic if you could just keep the Q&A for specific questions for the Q&A at the end. Yeah, so here we are. Welcome Kay, welcome Dan. This is a very exciting and beautiful conversation to be weaving together your two incredible stories and bodies of work and knowledge and wisdom around heritage seeds and nutrient density and how each of you support a global community through those bodies of work. So before I introduce you both properly and before you give us a little intro into yourselves, just to welcome everybody in, I am going to be the host today. My name is Amber Rose. I am actually Kay's daughter, so have grown up immersed in the world of heritage seed saving and very delicious food. I feel very fortunate to have been brought into this world, into one of probably the most incredible situations where I was able to eat all year round from the garden, incredible nutrient dense food, and enjoy the flavour and health, which is two of the concepts we're focusing on today, from the vegetables and fruits and seasonal produce that I was able to enjoy all my childhood. And I have a specific interest also in what you're doing, Dan, as well, around nutrient density and how that impacts not only flavor from a enjoyment and pleasure-filled experience as a foodie and a chef, but also from a health perspective, having had my own health journeys and tend to always go to food as the first port of call when something arises around my health. I managed to fully reverse autoimmune disease through diet and ancestral wisdom with food and bone broth and various things. So really interested to dive into how nutrient density impacts health, not only from a personal level, but an ecological and cultural level as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, we will be diving into all these things. So how about Kay, would you like to give us an intro into who you are and where your journey started and where you are now?
A very short, brief one, I think, but I think it'll be useful for some people. So basically, I grew up in a family where we always had a garden, and even as a child, I had a garden. And I was at university during the Vietnam War years when it sort of first became popular. The whole organic movement was sort of beginning. And so for 30 years, I became a staunch member of the organic movement right from the beginning, really. And I always always had a certified organic garden. And for many years, I thought that was the be all and end all, and I couldn't possibly do anything. What was there that was better than that? And I got to a point, probably when I was about 50, when the kids were leaving home, and I suddenly realized I don't think I've got a clue what's going on in the soil, and neither do any of my organic certifiers that come and visit me every year, because they couldn't answer my questions as I couldn't answer them either.
Yeah.
And I could see there were issues. I didn't understand why I was having to pour liquid cow manure or liquid fish or liquid fertilizer onto my garden to make things grow, and I was already putting on more compost than all the organic people had ever seen anyone put on each square meter. And I just had lots of questions. And at the same time, I had lots of questions about my health. I knew that my kids who'd grown up on what I'd thought at the time amazing food, and in a way it was, but I felt like there were things that we shouldn't have had if it was the ultimate way to feed ourselves.
Yeah.
So I had big questions. I put them out to the universe, and right at that time, there was a man called Dr. Arden Anderson started traveling around New Zealand, teaching people in 3 days how to grow nutrient-dense food. But I knew I wouldn't be able to understand him because I have no science background. I rejected science like when I was about 14. And so we sent our apprentice, and he had a science degree, and he came back and said, "Can I have my own garden? I'd rather not," because he'd been gardening with me. And I said, "Are you sure? Like, this is 30 years of hard work in this heavy clay soil." And he said, "Yep." And so we gave him a paddock that was also heavy clay soil and said, "Good luck." And within 4 months, he taught me how to use a refractometer, and he'd learned on the course. And within 4 months, the bricks of his vegetables was like, I think 10 to 12. And in my garden, which was amazing looking garden, which had guided tours going around it all the time from all these Aucklanders, and it looked incredible, the bricks of the vegetables in my garden was 4 to 6. So that was it for me. That was a challenge, a big challenge. And I just set off on a journey, and it's been a 20-year journey. And for the first part of that journey, I worked with environmental fertilizers who were making fertilizer based on the work of Dr. Kerry Reams, and they were doing Reams soil tests, and I loved all that, and I was using that, and it worked really well to a certain extent. But when they stopped supplying fertilizer, I knew that I'd actually already begun at home. I knew that I had to get off the fertilizer. We
Yep.
had to find a way to get off industrial fertilizer. And a lot of people just can't afford it. They can't even think about it. And I mean, I know in New Zealand, and I'm probably around the rest of the world as well. And I felt like it was my job to do enough science around it to develop a pattern language for how we can do it in our own local environments. And so now, as a result of having to get off the fertilizer and wanting to get off the fertilizer, we've developed our own set of a pattern language and a set of recipes around how to do it, all from your own local environment, which has probably been some of the most important work I've done, I think. So yeah, so it's just been a long journey of staying open to learning, walking through having the courage to walk through the doors when they open, and listening. It's been amazing, and I know it's only beginning.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Awesome, thank you. I just realized as well, I didn't properly actually even introduce either of you. I've jumped straight into you introducing yourself. So just quickly, a lot of people here will already know who Kay is, and it's so wonderful reading the chat box. Actually, there's people in here saying, I used to share your sheep and I visited your place 20 or 30 years ago. So yeah, amazing. So Dan, welcome. You are an absolute legend, and it's been so awesome discovering your work. And just to introduce you quickly before you dive into some of your history of how you ended up here, you are the founder of the Bionutrient Food Association, an international speaker and one of the world's leading voices on nutrient density. You work with growers to develop deeper collaboration with nature and understanding and measuring the quality of our food. And I think one of the big things that really inspired me with the talks I recently listened to of yours as well is the level of passion you have for empowering farmers and consumers to drive a healthier and more transparent food system, which I think is really lacking or totally lacking within the industrial paradigm. So would love to hear some of your journey of how you got here and yeah, concept of nutrient density.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful honor to be here and with the two of you. It's thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, my father was a campus organizer in the in the Vietnam War times. I guess my mother grew up on a farm where her mother was following the Rodale, organic stuff, in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So, but my parents were community organizers in inner city Boston when they met, and basically went back to the land. I was 4, my siblings were younger than me, and they bought a piece of land on a dirt road and built a passive solar house with a root cellar and a wood stove, and got a milk cow and planted an orchard and tried to homestead. And that's how I was raised. So I think it's similar to you, Amber, and how you were raised. And I think we have some deep commonality in having been completely anomalous in our generation, which is great to find someone. There's not many of us white people that grew up on homesteads in the 80s. So yeah, it certainly provides a certain kind of perspective, which is not normal. Yeah, my parents were actively involved in the organic farming movement. They helped write some of the first organic standards in the U.S. They ran their day job was running an organization called NOFA, Northeast Organic Farming Association. But yeah, we on the farm struggled with pests and diseases and failure to thrive and all that kind of stuff. I managed the farm through college into my 20s. I was a bit of an activist in my 20s, but when I got married and wanted to start a family and live that similar lifestyle as well, both parents at home, kids on the land, no TV, sort of keep it as simple as possible. I thought that I would, I mean, the only skill I had is for doing productive things was farming, and I rapidly realized that I was a bad farmer because I couldn't make a living. I had lots of pest pressure and disease pressure, and went through the same realization process that Kay went through about, like, you know, just because we thought we were God's greatest gift didn't make it true. And pest pressure, disease pressure is not a sign of health. And I started researching, going to conferences, reading books, attending seminars, things like that. I found the ecosystem in the US called Acres USA, which was developed by a guy named Charles Walters in the early 70s. Arden was one of my early teachers. There was a number of elders in that community, Arden certainly being one of them, where I was exposed to bricks and the Reams method and Albrecht and a whole bunch of stuff, mineral balancing, and there's just a whole amazing suite of integrated wisdom and that big tent, which is Acres, which involves biochemistry and microbiology and, you know, biophysics and organic and permaculture and biodynamic and agroecology and quantum and indigenous, and all these sort of streams of wisdom are all respected and accepted. And, you know, they call it biological ag, like basically working in harmony with nature. Biology, like it's about life, basically. It's not I'm organic or I'm regenerative. It's like, it's about life, and understand that, and maybe you got a chance. And so, yeah, I basically started, you know, shifting practices and got to a point in short order where I was making a living working part-time, working 20 hours a week. I was paying the bills, farming. And I said, my God, this is something that is not normal. And even though I'm particularly shy and introverted, I felt obliged to start talking about it. And so workshops turned into courses, turned into an organization, founded in 2010. And I was actually part of that conversation of, you know, with Arden and a bunch of the other elders at Acres, settling on this term nutrient density to discuss this concept that there is variation in nutrient levels in food. All carrots are not uniform. All beef is not uniform. There is a variation in nutrient levels. The refractometer is a very simple, almost 200-year-old instrument that can be used to measure it. God gave us really sophisticated tools to measure it called noses and tongues, which are really, really good. And so when a carrot doesn't taste good, that's it's nature telling you it's not that good. And even if you think you're a good person and you're a small local organic farmer, blah, 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 if your carrots are bitter, you know, you got opportunities for improvement. So yeah, anyway, started teaching courses. Those courses spread through word of mouth across the US and into other countries. All that stuff we do through the BFA is all freely available on YouTube, online, all of our courses. I mean, you can pay to attend one in person, or you can just get it for free on YouTube. Our thought is this information should be available for all people in all continents of all scales, full stop, and not just restricted to those who have capacity to pay a consultant or something. So that was one of my insights going to Acres, was like, because I was raised by parents who ran a nonprofit, an educational organization, and I went to Acres and found all this beautiful insight, but it was all basically held by consultants, and you had to pay them $5,000 a day for their insight, or, you know, $500 to attend a workshop or something like that. And I was like, that's not right. I don't agree with that. So, yeah, been doing a lot of work on education and research, but then it started in 2017 with this idea of trying to define it, trying to build instruments to test it, and to take the insights of how organic was, you know, a beautiful impulse, but sort of turned into a binary, you know, bureaucratic, black and white reductionist structure, and seeing like, how can we solve the dialectic? How can we create a dynamic for people who want to discern relative quality of food to be able to tell in real time, and have it be a scale like 1 to 100, like this carrot boop, boop, is 20 out of 100, this one's 40 out of 100, this one's 80 out of 100. If we could provide that capacity for people to test before purchase and choose the best thing on the shelf and leave the worst on the shelf, if everybody could do that, that would incentivize the supply chain to focus on nutrition instead of volume, and that could transform the planet. If we could do that, we could absolutely create a dynamic where we could reverse climate change, we could suck the life force out of agribusiness, we could improve farm viability, we could, you know, no longer have chronic disease, facilitate people not having to be wage slaves and living in slums, and, you know, have land tenure. And I think powerfully, you know, shift the trajectory of human culture on this planet. At least that's my grand vision, which I know we've gone over to some decent degree over the past couple of days, Amber. I'm not sure how much time we'll have to go into it, but I see nutrient density as a leverage point, a high ground around which a whole suite of pieces of a broad social movement can find common cause. I think there's amazing people on this planet. There's so many amazing people doing brilliant work, and we don't have a mycelial web to facilitate our symbiosis. And the quality of food can be a high ground, I think, strategically, around which we can all find common cause to build solutions as opposed to fight problems, which, yeah, I think is a foundational framing as well. So I'll stop there.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I love the two things that really stand out within that is the concept that nutrient density is not a binary concept. It's not, is something nutrient dense or not. It's on a continuum, as you mentioned. And just when you understand that, you know, and as we dive into this topic through
Your sound's gone off, Amber.
Oh,
I can hear.
can you hear me?
I can.
Maybe just if someone in the chat box gives a thumbs up. Yeah, I can hear.
It's all good now.
Must be your end, Mum.
It's all good.
Yeah, the concept that, because I feel like for so long we've been really within our culture, we're fed these narratives that something is, you know, is or isn't. Is it organic? Is it not organic? Is something regenerative or degenerative? You know, we've been so used to thinking about things within a binary context, and the concept of nutrient density is a different paradigm. And not only are you creating through the regenerative biological ag this incredible nutrient density, but the ripple effect of that, as you said, across culture, health, community, systems, like everything, the possibility for change is like mind-blowing, actually. So yes, okay, so before we get into like some of the semantics, I thought yeah, hopefully it will be. How could it not be?
Yeah.
But before we get into some of the finer points, I thought it would be a really cool place to start, just to talk briefly about what is a heritage seed, because it's also wonderful to be able to weave some of these bodies of work together, like how heritage seeds that are grown regeneratively in biologically alive living soils, how they feed into the you know, system around nutrient density and soil health.
They're a key crucial component of that, in fact. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like as well within the regenerative ag conversation, the heritage seeds are the elephant in the room, because they're hard to get hold of, first of all. Not many people take the time to actually grow and save and sell heritage seeds on a larger scale. It's a very difficult thing to do. And most people are just interested in the bottom line. So the heritage seeds tend to get left out of the conversation, but actually they're a key component in having a whole connected living system. So Kay, we would love to hear, and I know there's not one definition, but just from your perspective and how you save seeds, what is a heritage seed to you?
Can I just go back one step and do a real quick little thing about epigenetics? Because I think it helps people understand. So
yeah.
So I had a 18-year-old German guy over here a few years ago. In Germany, they learn about epigenetics, and he was able to explain it to me in a way I could understand it, and I loved it. And it's so important to understand, because even what both Amber and Dan were saying before about there's so many flow-on effects, but in the biological agricultural world, everything is connected, and you really start to see and feel and get that everything's connected. So if you change one thing, you change everything. It's like the dance of life. Well, with epigenetics, when we talk about genetics or genes, I see this double helix spiral in my mind's eye. And in the 1990s, at the end of the Human Genome Project, where the scientists were trying to identify every bit of every gene in the human body so that they could control them, they got to a point where they realized that they had identified them perhaps, but they didn't know how to control them, because genes, they didn't know how to turn them on and off. And so we came to understand that that double helix spiral was made up of, some of it was made up of our genes, but they didn't know what the rest of it was, and they called it the junk DNA. which is
They call it
hilarious
junk
now when
DNA.
you think that anybody could think that a part of our body was junk. But now we understand that this is so important,
Yeah.
that part of our body is the part of our body that communicates with the life we live, the environment we live in, our thoughts, the water we drink, the friends, the stress at work, and our food, everything. And so, and we know at the moment, what we know is that there are only 3 things in our food that junk DNA actually communicates with, and that is minerals, vitamins, and traditional fats and oils. So, and we also know from the work of Weston Price that the levels of vitamins and minerals and fatty acids that we need to maintain our health are really high. But the epigenetic part of it is that when you live in somewhere on this earth and you build connections with the Papatūānuku, Mother Earth, Ranganui, the Sky Father, and you save your own seed and you grow your own food and save your own seed and grow your own food, that part of our body, the junk DNA, builds connections. We end up with all these neural pathways that recognize the food of our own ancestors, and that food connects us with Papatūānuku, connects us with the earth, connects us with the sky, and that is the reason why we are different. If we've co-evolved in Africa or co-evolved in the Pacific or maybe Alaska, or because the earth is different minerals, different energy, different vibration. The energy coming in from the universe at that point is different, and we're the end result. We are a manifestation of the co-evolution of the human genes and the earth and the sky, and we're always changing. So the key thing is to understand, I think, that, or for me, the big lesson out of epigenetics is that environment controls genetic expression.
Yep.
So no matter what happened to our parents, we can change it by changing the environment. And if we are passed on down, genetic things that might make us more susceptible to getting cancer or breast cancer or whatever, we can change that by changing the environment, because the communication that happens between our lives that we live, including our food, create tags which are placed on our DNA, which determines how our DNA expresses. So if we eat food that's homogenized, had the fat taken out, it's extended, it's like emulsified, it's grown from genetically engineered seed, the communication is really weak with our junk DNA. And the tags that get placed on our DNA are holy, and we express in a less than perfect way. So we actually have the power. That's the best thing about an understanding of epigenetics. We have the ability to control our health by the way we live. And food is a really important part of that. And for me, it's been like the answer to pretty much everything. So coming back to seeds. So if you're living in a biological world where you're saving your own seeds, then through the years, you develop neural pathways and your body recognizes the food grown from those seeds, and you are more fully nourished by the food grown from those seeds than if you're eating some food grown from someone else's heritage seed. So a heritage seed has got to be seed that is connected to the environment you live in and you. Like it's a thing that when a heritage seed starts to grow, it communicates via the microbes and the fungi in the soil with all the energies of the soil in that place, and it pulls in from the universe all this information, and that information is then communicated to you via a healthy gut. And so it's passing to us. The seasons are changing, and it's all the information that's happening in our environment actually is communicated to us via our gut and the microbes in our gut and our junk DNA. So it's like we're in a circle of life. And that is the most powerful thing, I think, is to it only takes like a simple step to step back into that circle of life or dance of life. I feel like it's a dance, like it only, like saving a seed that is connected to your land, your garden, your soil, and your body. I mean, it takes a few years, I think, to like really start to feel the power of it. And my experience is it actually takes like 2 generations before somebody else's heritage seed really is your heritage seed. In our family, I think that's what's happened. So for me, a heritage seed is a seed that is connected to my body, my family, my whānau, and my ecosystem. And because it's connected to those things, it nourishes me totally differently than food grown from anyone else's seed. I can't see the value in a heritage seed that's come from California or Africa or Holland that has actually been grown in an industrial system for the last 20 or 30 years, that before that was someone's heritage seed, maybe in France or who knows where. Like, it's connected to, well, I don't even know if it is anymore, because they've been grown in industrial systems for so long now, which aren't, but necessarily, even if it's certified organic, does not mean it's a biological system. And the communication with the earth and the sky is dependent on a biological system. So for me, heritage seeds are our own seeds of our people and our land. And there's something really magic about that.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. Can I respond, or
Sure.
just say a couple
Absolutely,
of things to amplify or accentuate, or yeah, beautiful. Epigenetics, exactly. This is great because I feel like we are both singing from the same hymnal. We may have different parts, but we're singing the same song. So it's beautiful. And one of my favorite songs is actually, it's called The Garden Song. I'm not sure if anybody knows it, the inch by inch, row by row. It's
Oh, yeah.
a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful song. It talks all about the, you know, the food from the garden in your bones and the and all that. But yeah, I think when I explain these topics, I say them a little bit differently, but I think I mean, maybe for just, it's always good to offer different sort of framings. When I talk about epigenetics, I talk about the sort of the health of the grandmother, you know, affects the health of the mother, and the health of the mother affects the health of the daughter. And if you are in a situation where your grandmother started eating processed product that, you know, was not a natural thing, it was a product of industry, and she started having her body built out of that, which was incoherent, and then began to get some of the genetic markers that we correlate with chronic disease and diabetes and cancer and things like that. And then your mother was born, and you know, her genetic material wasn't quite as coherent as her mother's was, and she then ate, you know, more products of more processed industrial manufacture. Then that, you know, had that continued epigenetic effect of degrading the coherence of her DNA, and then you're born, and you're 3 generations in now, or 4, depending on when, you know, how old people are and how many decades or generations have spent since their parents were not eating food from the land. And we become, you know, degenerate. We're physiologically degenerate, and I ascribe that to a large part of why culture sits in the way it does right now, is because functionally what we've been building our bodies out of for a couple of generations is junk. And one of the elders in the Acres world that I learned from, his name was Jerry Brunetti. He talked about research that was done at the University of Iowa with pigs. They said they found the, you know, the prize winning sow at the Iowa State Fair, the sort of the sexiest, best looking, best conformation, blah, 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 perfect sow, pig. And they, you know, decided to do an experiment, and they fed her poorly, and they fed her piglets poorly. And then by the time they got down to her grand piglets, they were downer pigs. They couldn't stand up without breaking their legs. They were just really, really rough shape. And then they took those grand piglets and fed them well, and fed their piglets well. And 3 generations, they're back to that prize winning conformity. Like, what you eat affects what you are, and if you can break it, you can fix it, right? You get a new body every 6 months. I mean, your blood takes 2 weeks to replace itself, your bones take 7 years, but if you average it out, you get a new body every 6 months. And physiologically, all of our system functions have to do with, you know, the environmental conditions, not just the physical food, as you said, all the thoughts and emotions and environmental conditions of water coherence and 5G and everything else. These are all dynamics that occur and affect us. And so that, yeah, as far as epigenetics, that applies critically to seed. And so you know, in my mind, when we're talking to farmers about optimizing the health of the crops they're producing, if they're buying seed that has been fed, you know, poorly for multiple generations, if its great-great-grandmothers were unhealthy and its grandmothers were great-grandmothers were unhealthy and its grandmothers were unhealthy, that epigenetic effect of that seed is that you have very low vigor, and the capacity to produce high quality food is really just quite difficult. All the agronomic practices, all the mineral balancing, all the microbiome stuff, all the cover crops and the, you know, all the best practices in the world, if you start with seed that's weak, it becomes extraordinarily difficult. I always say this in my courses, like this is the thing that's the most difficult thing to change, because it's true. If you do shift practices, you can cause soil to perform massively beautifully in a couple of months, because life is so powerful that if you create the dynamics where life has what she needs, boom, things will take off. But if you're starting with seed that's in rough shape, it'll take 2 or 3 generations to bring it back to something coherent. And so it's a critically important piece of this conversation. That's one thing, but then the other side, it's interesting how you define heritage. I started this series of books called the Ringing Cedar series, it's called the Anastasia series,
Oh, yeah.
about this woman who's an indigenous woman from Siberia. And she talks about, you know, when you plant a seed, the first thing you should do is you should put it in your mouth and let it connect with you and with your saliva and your biochemistry, and consciously invoke and, you know, gratefully, respectfully engage and say, you know, hey, if you're going to be growing for me to eat, like, you know, thank you. And, you know, through the life cycle of that plant, you are consciously, sensitively caring for it like you would care for a child or a dog or a, you know, a cow or whatever. You just lovingly care for them, right? And if you do that with those plants, as it goes through the growing season, they will biochemically shift their nutrients to be optimized for your body. And there is that very conscious co-creation between the plants and the animals if we're willing to accept it. And so that's a beautiful definition of heritage, is like literally my family, me, 2 or 3 generations of that dialed in, you know, would be the optimal food for you, which you can't buy. You can't buy that.
No,
Right? It
no, you can
requires
only go for what is the closest seeds in your environment, really, and then open pollinate the seeds and then take it from there.
what you can do is you can take, you know,
Yeah,
seeds are grown in Oregon, which is a, you know, a hot, dry environment where there's not so much disease, and so then therefore they can grow seed crops without having mothers get sick. Like, at least you can take those seeds and grow them in your bioregion. That would be one step forward. But this level of doing it personally, I think I completely agree with. Yeah, just affirming that.
There's one more thing, Amber, with the seeds too. So assuming we're growing we've got family seeds or as close as we can to local seeds, and we're growing it in a biological system, then there was a big challenge, and Acres USA is one of my favorite magazines, and there was a big challenge by a guy called John Frankson there a few years ago, saying that if we're actually going to do a good job of growing heritage seeds, we have to select, once we harvest the seeds, we have to sort them by size and then by weight, so that all the small light seeds get thrown away.
Yep.
The largest, heaviest seeds are the ones that have grown the most mineral into them, and they
100%.
get kept for the mother seed to grow the next year's crop. And everything that's left is what you sell. So if we're doing that every year, and we have been doing that every year for like 20 years, I mean, it's 40 years we've been saving them, but I've been actively doing that for quite a while now. And that makes an enormous difference to the quality of the seed, and you can see that changing year to year.
If you're buying seed or whatever seed you're planting, if you search through it and you take the fat seeds and plant them here and the flat seeds and plant them there, you can watch which ones have vigor and vitality, which ones are weak and sickly. And it completely correlates, seed size and weight completely correlates with vigor and vitality. 100%. Don't just say the seed, sort it. Yes, absolutely. We are singing from the same hymnal.
I love the story of the guy who developed the rainbow Inca corn. What was his name? Alan Capula.
Yes,
and
he was brilliant.
uncurled a cob of corn seed by seed, going round and round and round, and planted it all in one row in a paddock. And the seed at the end sort of was like so high, and it went up and up and up, made a big rainbow. And so when we when we process our corn cobs, we cut off both ends of the cob and only sell the seed from the middle, because
Nice.
when you do that, you can see they grow completely differently. They're a different shape. The seeds look quite different.
I've always said for years, this is one of the biggest issues in the whole process. And I don't know of any seed company anywhere on the planet that is actually focusing on quality of seed as a central factor. And I think I might have finally met one.
Yeah, so this is why I feel like the conversation around heritage seed is so important, because
Yeah.
who could ever know, and most people don't understand, because there is no official definition of a heritage seed. If you were to buy a heritage, like for example, heritage tomatoes are very popular at the farmers markets and things, so people will often look for, heritage tomato seed at the garden centre or wherever. But it's like a heritage seed that is grown industrially within a degenerative system is a vastly different thing than a heritage seed that is grown in living soil and saved in the way that you do. Like, the two things are not comparable.
It's a continuum, right? The whole point is it's a
Yeah.
continuum of optimal vitality and atrocious rudimentary and everything in between. And that's the whole concept around nutrient density is, can we, in like some extremely rudimentary, mechanistic, scientific way, begin to define 1 in 100 and give people the ability to say, like, just because you're local, just because it's a tomato, just because it's organic, doesn't mean it's optimal. You want to think it is. Right? You want to think because you're getting the tomatoes at your farmer's market or because you're buying organic that things are better, but we've done the research and it's not pretty. It's really everything out there is pretty
Exactly. So
damn
this is
bad.
like
Sorry, guys.
so I feel like it would be so good to explain, Dan, because we were chatting last night about and this is like a bit of a paradigm shifter around the concept of regenerative growing, because even this blew me away. I didn't even know this until last night, until you explained it to me, around the concept of, like, first of all, what is nutrient density? And then the fact that if you're growing within a regenerative, biologically alive system, and this is the controversial part, that there's been tests done to show that if there's a Roundup put on a pasture or, wherever, that
burn down a cover crop.
is it at the end of the, or maybe it would be better if you explained this, but it's the concept of, if you grow organically, things can still have residue of glyphosate and they're not nutrient dense, or if things are grown in a regenerative system. So I would love to hear you explain.
Let me just tell you that story, because I think is an interesting point, and then I can talk about what I think nutrient density is, or how we're beginning to frame the conversation. And this comes from a Kiwi. This comes from Nicole Masters, who told me this. So I'm just going to refer anybody's got a question, like, she told me. So that's where the story came from. And she's living in Montana now, which is in the American West, and working with a lot of big, a lot of beef producers, but also some wheat producers, wheat growers. And so she told me the story of 2 farms. One was quote unquote regenerative, and they were putting in their cover crops in the fall, and those cover crops were established and they were well and they were growing. And then in the spring, they sprayed those cover crops with glyphosate, Roundup, to kill them before they went in and planted their seeds, the wheat seeds. And the other farm was an organic farm, and I don't know whether they cover cropped or not, but they went through in the spring and they tilled the soil and planted their seeds. And then they cultivated a couple of times, to keep the weeds down. The regenerative farm, even though they'd sprayed the glyphosate down, they basically, what that meant was there was a bunch of mulch, like the dead cover crops were laying on the soil as a nice mulch layer, and all the roots that had been, if it's 6-foot tall cover crops, it's 6-foot deep cover crop roots. And so there's a lot of, stuff there. When that wheat was harvested and it was going to be exported to Europe, and they had to do a glyphosate test on the wheat, the stuff that was regeneratively grown that had the glyphosate sprayed in the spring came back with 0 residue. And the stuff that was organic that had nothing sprayed on it came back with residue. And the question was, where did it come from? And why? How did that work? That doesn't make any sense. And the answer is, well, in the US at least, there's a lot of glyphosate sprayed, and it ends up, going up with the water vapor and coming down with the rain. And so It doesn't matter whether you're organic or not, you're getting rained on. Everybody's getting rained on. The oceans, the rivers, the streams, the forests, the fields, everybody's getting rained down with glyphosate and a whole bunch of other stuff. Who knows what all, right? There's tons of stuff in the environment. The regenerative farm, because they had created a dynamic where the microbes are functioning so well, because they hadn't disturbed the soil structure, because there was a beautiful mulch layer, because there was tons of roots there, because the soil hadn't been disturbed, had a well enough functioning microbiome to digest that glyphosate that was sprayed and to digest the glyphosate that had come down in the rain and all the other PCBs and dioxin and everything else was in the environment, because microbes have magical powers, right? Microbes are the saviors. They're the foundation. They're like 90% of our cells are not human. They're microbial. Like only when we create a dynamic where the microbes are flourishing will we be taken care of. And so the fact is, like, they will create a dynamic where they're healthy. And so if like glyphosate, boom, no problem. We'll just digest it into its component parts. That's not hard. They can totally do that, right? They can totally digest all these things into their component protons and neutrons and atoms and coppers and zincs. Like it's just those are building blocks of nature. And so even though it's a toxic compound, in the presence of a well-functioning microbiome, it can be digested. In the organic farm, even though they're certified organic, they're engaging in tillage. They have bare soil. They are not necessarily facilitating a strong microbial ecosystem. And so that glyphosate that comes down in the rain, which is not much, because the microbiome isn't healthy, is not digested.
That is so important.
So it's about life. It's about life. It's about life. And if you have a dogma that says, I'm permaculture, I'm God's greatest gift, I'm a biodynamic person, I'm obviously, of a better ilk. We organic people knew we were better. Regenerative is the religion of this decade, I would say. Everybody says, I want to be on the regenerative bandwagon. Like, I like to say, Christ was probably a pretty cool dude, but it wasn't long after he died that people were being given blessings by the church to engage in rape and pillage, right? I mean, they called it the Crusades, but like the church blessed people to go and rape other people. Like, you can create a church, like, which is a religion, which is a binary, which is a dogma. Like, there may be some core insights that are beautiful, but oftentimes these things get turned into this reductionist framework that gets yeah. So anyway, for me, nutrient density is a way out of that trap, right? It gets us out of the binary. I'm organic, you're not organic. I'm local, you're not local. I'm regenerative, you're not regenerative. That binary, which is not true, and into a continuum of results. So like this carrot is more flavorful. This carrot came from soil that had more life. This carrot had better pest and disease resistance. This carrot has better nutrient levels. It's got a better shelf life. This carrot is somewhat more flavorful. It comes from a decently alive soil. It comes at decent pest and disease resistance. It has decent shelf life. This carrot is really not flavorful. It came from a dead dirt, not soil. It had no pest and disease resistance. So to be able to establish that continuum and to define it formally, and then to be able to build instruments to assess it is the whole vision behind nutrient density, is to sort of step out of this religious, dogmatic, us, them, black, white, binary framing into which is all about practices, like individual practices. We do this and you don't do it, so we're better than you are. Well, depending on who you are, depending on what your soil is, your soil needs different things at different times, right? Anybody who's ever raised kids or raised animals, like some days the kids need a nap. Some days they need, a cuddle. Some days they just need to eat something, right? At different points in time, based on what's going on with them, they have different imbalances. And only when you are sensitive and supporting the child with what it needs can you expect it to find the balance and then maintain the harmony and proceed forward. Think of your soil the same way, right? Your soil, the land, is a living, sensitive being, and at different points in time has different needs. And
it's intelligent.
It's conscious. It's conscious. It's the spirit of the land. All proper cultures understand our role is to serve, and caretake that sacred being. And so if you engage the land in this reductionist binary certification protocol framework, you're engaging in the reductionist, dogmatic, colonized mentality, and you're missing the point. So the whole idea about nutrient density is to begin to sort of shift that conversation and tune into a way of letting the results be the guide right? The health of the plant is a thing, and the nuances. And so I don't think I necessarily explained it perfectly, but maybe give you some broad strokes.
Yeah, I think that's great. The thing that comes out of that for me is that it's not that difficult to focus on doing what you're talking about, but very soon you get to feel and see on every level that if you just do that one little thing, you're also building life in the soil, you're improving the waterways, you're actually improving everything because everything's connected. So it
Because
becomes
it's
a very
all one,
powerful small step.
and it feels better.
It
And you get
feels
a level of
incredible. It feels like
fulfillment
magic.
that it is magic. It's
Mm.
consciousness, it's God, it's nature, it's
Yeah.
magic. It's what it is. It's
And I
life.
think that connection and that feeling is what's missing in the whole world. Like, it's because we've become so disconnected, like we're totally
Denatured,
disconnected from everything, from
colonized.
everything, that we don't feel that love, that magic, however you want to call it. We don't feel it anymore. And so I think that's just one simple way to like totally change everything.
I don't think there's any, I mean, I like to say we are animals. We belong in nature. There's this whole thing about like humans should be in cities because humans are not nature and we're bad, and like this whole thing about climate change, this whole storyline, this is like cities are the solution. Like, no. Well, like indigenous cultures worked profoundly with all land on all continents for millennia, right? With no wheel, with no plow, with no beast of burden, and we're able to optimize vitality and fecundity and have deep spiritual cultures. Humans are not bad, right? We can completely holistically engage in deep symbiosis with nature. It's not like we don't belong in the land. We do belong in the land. And we will only be our full potential if we are on land and with land. As long as we're wage slaves and living in boxes and operating on screens, we're missing the primary dynamic, which is life. We're engaging in this false mechanistic paradigm. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we are becoming denatured. And what happens when you become denatured is you die.
Yeah.
You either evolve in symbiosis with nature and you flourish, or you devolve out of harmony with nature and you die off. That's called evolution. That's how it works.
And the scary thing is that that's become normalized. So sick people, it's now normal to be sick, and people
Yeah.
are, yeah.
And what's happening
Yes,
is now we're getting to
essentially
the point of not being
the
able to reproduce. Yeah.
You go, Amber.
Amber.
So essentially, like in a very simplistic way, you could say that the process of regeneration is the process of renaturing.
Mm-hmm. Becoming deeper and deeper and more in harmony with life and all around you, with community and culture and food and honor and tradition and spirit. I mean, love, basically.
Exactly. And I think that's like the little nugget that we started this little bit here with, which is the concept of a biological system as opposed to just doing organics. And just doing organics is simply not putting something on, but it's still not a system that is aligned with the nature's way of doing things.
And that's the certification, which is what was the binary reductionist mechanistic structure, which was imposed upon what had been a beautiful civil society, grassroots, bottom-up movement of back to the land, people trying to have this impulse of returning to the land. That's what my parents were. My parents were back to the landers. They were like, you know what, the city thing is stupid. Like, we can't in good honor raise our children there. We need to raise them on the land. And it was a cultural impulse that happened, and now it's turned into a certification label. So there's organic culture and organic certification. It's the same with regenerative. The regenerative impulse, deeply practiced and understood, is profound. It's renaturing, the essence of regeneration. But there's all this talk about regenerative labels now, and that's like, it's Christ and Christianity, right? Anyway, sorry, I'm talking too much.
So it's all good. It's all good. So it would be awesome to understand how some of these connections take place. So from a seed to soil connection, and then how the end product of a beautiful nature aligned seed to soil connection, you end up with really full, living, alive, nutrient-dense heritage seeds, we're then able to grow those seeds in living soil and measure the nutrient density through that. So let's just follow that journey through. So how does, because this is a really cool part as well, like how modern hybridized seeds aren't able to fully connect with the life in the soil, but a fertile, non-hybrid heritage seed, how is that able to connect with the life in the soil?
You want to go,
Okay.
Kay?
My understanding is that hybrid seeds and seeds bred in laboratories in lifeless systems have enzyme blockers in them which prevent them. I don't fully understand the science of this, but they have enzyme blockers in them which prevent them from connecting and communicating with life. I mean, it's pretty easy to imagine that a seed bred for many generations in a laboratory in a dead system is going to lose its ability to connect with life in the soil. But there's more to it than that. I think there's a genetic, there's science behind it as well. And so that's my limited understanding of what's happening. Maybe Dan knows more than that.
Yeah, when you raise this, so like there's this concept, I like to use it when people talk about fertilizer and feeding your plants. Like we talk about fertilizer, like fertilizer is a technical term. It's governed by the government. It means something legally, and it means soluble nutrient.
Yeah.
So a fertilizer is a soluble nutrient. So I use the metaphor of an IV drip, and I say if you were in a car accident, in a coma,
I use heroin.
What's that?
You say you're mainlining your plants just like heroin.
Well, I mean, but in a practical standpoint, it's not. I mean, it's like injecting soluble nutrients directly into the bloodstream can keep the plant alive.
Yeah.
But the impact on your microbiome is to starve it to death. And if your microbiome is the core of your immunity and is the vast majority of the life in your being, like injecting soluble nutrients into your body so you can be kept alive is not the point, right? I mean, that's sure you can be kept alive, but your being is not fully, inhabited. And so it's only when you've got the plants making sugar in their leaves, which is then being injected into the soil to feed the microbes, who then go and digest the soil, which then feeds the plants. It's only when you've got that beautiful symbiotic dynamic going on that you have plants that have a well-functioning microbiome. And the core microbiome is like the colostrum. It's like, so if you raise a plant for multiple generations on a soluble nutrient drip program, it loses the ability to work with its gut flora that is evolved out of it. And so those hybrid seeds that have been fed fertilizer for generations literally do lose the capacity to work with the microbiome. And so, you have to have plants that were raised in nature to have a healthy microbiome, to have that functional capacity to work with nature. And so if you take the hybrid seed and you put it in a soil and don't give it fertilizer, the hybrid seed's like, what am I supposed to do? Like it's lost the ability to work with soil.
Yeah, the way that
needs to be fed fertilizer to be kept alive.
Yeah. I think other words to describe the same thing, or the way that I have understand it, is that when you're using soluble fertilizer, you're probably feeding the plant with nitrate nitrogen, and nitrate nitrogen can't synthesize the photosynthesis process. It doesn't catalyze the photosynthesis process. So although the plant might look amazing, it's got a very low Brix. Whereas when you're working with the soil and the microbiome in the soil, and the sugars are feeding the fungi and the fungi are feeding the plants, then it's phosphate that takes the minerals into the plant, and phosphate catalyzes the photosynthesis process, and you get a higher Brix plant. So it's critical, if we want healthy food, to be using the life in the soil to grow the plants.
I asked people, when in the first 420 million years of plants growing land, did anybody add nitrogen fertilizer?
Yeah.
Like, when was nitrogen fertilizer? Like, on none of the first 6 days did God invent fertilizer. Like, it's a product of industry, which is really good for industry if you buy more and more of it, which is great if your objective is to maximize profit for industry. But if your objective is to empower life, then doing things which are unnatural is not a good strategy. So on my farm, one of the rules is thou shalt not add nitrogen. Like, 78% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. All plants have evolved the ability to work with microbes and the critical minerals to pull nitrogen out of the atmosphere to feed themselves. Only when that process is functioning should you expect a plant to be healthy. And by adding nitrogen, you actually create a dynamic where that process is broken, right? So
Yeah,
adding
it
fertilizers
stops
is
it.
the best way to stop nature from functioning.
Yeah, that's the scariest thing though. If you're a traditional like industrial farmer and you want to become a regenerative farmer or biological farmer, stopping putting it on is such a scary thing, I think.
Well, but it's an evolutionary process. We evolved, we devolved, we need to revolve, right? I mean, so you can't just do cold turkey. You can't just stop all this stuff. You have to evolve the process. You need to really evolve your thinking and your understanding and your relationship with nature and everything else. There's lots of pieces in the puzzle to produce optimal quality.
Yeah, there's a great little question here actually in the chat box, which is that I don't understand why a hybrid seed is not using the life in the soil. You can grow hybrid seeds in the ground that is alive, i.e. without artificial fertilizer. I kind of have my own thoughts around that, but I'd love to hear from both of you because yes, it will grow, but it's like the going back to the epigenetics of the mother, the daughter, the granddaughter, right? Things are broken down, so you're not going to get a very nutrient dense plant. Plus also those hybrid seeds, you can't save your own seed again. They're infertile.
They're not necessarily infertile. They just don't necessarily breed true to type, right? Okay. I mean, yeah. And yeah, I would say there's a continuum within hybrids. There's a continuum within all these things. So to ever be black and white, hybrid this, not that is always simplifying. So if I said that, I apologize. I didn't mean to say that. It's just that when you select a seed for multiple generations in a fertilizer environment, it loses the ability to function well with its microbiome. It doesn't lose it all. It just maybe lose 80% of it. For those who don't know about a refractometer, I got one right here. This is a refractometer. And I think they cost $20. There's no battery. You can use it 10,000 times. It's a really, really good tool to test plant health. I didn't know this from all my decades of being a farmer, an organic farmer. Like, but if a plant grew, I figured it was healthy. Like, if you take I've got a little garlic press right here. You take the leaf, you stick it in the garlic press, you squish a drop of juice out of it. It gets onto here. You look through here, and you see like a spot, and it'll be like the line will be between 4 or at 6 or whatever. A great way for everybody to actually engage this process, if they've got a garden, is to do that, is to go out and squish the leaves of your plants and see what the number is. And if you have a Brix reading of 4 or 6, like Kay was saying, 20 years ago is where she was at, that's not healthy. 12 is the baseline for healthy as far as we understand. And so you can plant that hybrid seed and a rematriated seed in the same soil, and we're guessing that the one that has co-evolved in that land is going to be functioning better, all things considered. But just because something is green does not make it healthy. That's the first thing we need to understand is there's a continuum of health, and if you're not humble, if you're not willing to say just because something's green does not mean it's optimal, we probably don't waste your time listening to us. You have to be humble to begin with, because none of us is doing anywhere close to what's possible. And when you do see plants that are really healthy, it blows your mind, and it's so exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. The highest Brix I ever got was oats, which is always the highest thing in the garden, and it was 26.
Yeah, and they probably were doing amazing things. Those probably were rocking. Yeah.
Dan, what can the Brix go up to?
I don't know. I mean, if you get to 12, you should take a deep breath, go swimming, like congratulate yourself. I mean, definitely people are in the 20s. I've heard of people talking about hitting 30, but like, the fact is most of us are at 3, 4, and 5. And the process of getting up to 8 or 10 actually requires some integrated discernment. So, I mean, for me, the question is, what is perfection? What is optimal? Like, do we even know? Like, can we have it be the challenge to begin to optimize function? Can that be our collective process of like, no one knows what's possible because most of us are living in a quite rudimentary environment.
Yeah, I don't think it's about the Brix anyway, really. I think it's about taking the Brix measurement, it's about the journey, and it's about improving. So,
Yeah.
better than last year, or better than like that you're on a journey and you're getting better. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, it's a process. That's the
Process,
yeah.
Okay, amazing. And so to follow that trajectory, so we've got the seed to soil, and then the capacity to measure bricks, which, can you just explain to us what bricks actually are, Dan? Like, it measures the TDS, doesn't it? The total dissolved solid.
Total dissolved solid. So Brix was a Austrian chemist, and I think it was the 1830s when the German vintners were like struggling with. They would pick their grapes, they'd squish them, they'd ferment them, they'd stick them in the barrels, they stick the barrels in the catacombs. 3 years later, they'd take them out and they were vinegar. Like, oh, and every now and then they come out with wine, but a lot of years it was coming out with vinegar, and they're like, this sucks. Like, can we figure out which grapes make nice wine and which grapes make vinegar, so we can stop trying to make wine with the bad grapes? And they all got together and they kicked in money for a pot, and they said, here's the prize money to whoever can figure out which grapes make high quality wine and which grapes don't. And Brix won the award. And just like a bunch of other 1800s white European men like Richter and Fahrenheit and Celsius, and there's a bunch of them that all got scales named after him. Brix got a scale named after him. And so it's calibrated to percent sucrose, which is sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that it's measuring sugar. It's not, because you can get a Brix reading on vinegar or battery acid. I like to use the example of, like, if you're taking a bath and you put your arm in the water and it looks like your arm is bent, and it's not bent, it's just the bending of light when it passes through water. If you were to take some Epsom salt and put it in that bath and stir it up and put your arm back in, if you look closely, your arm would look more bent. Of course, it's not bent at all. It's just the bend of light is more. So what a refractometer measures is refraction of light. It measures the bend of light when it passes through a fluid. And so you're just taking a leaf and you're squishing it and getting a drop of juice out of it. And the refractometer is literally the drop of juice is here, and it's just like, it's light. It's just like the ambient light, and you just see the bend. That's all it is. It's no battery. The things cost $20. You can find them online really easily. There's a direct correlation between the amount of stuff in the juice and the health of the plant.
I put the link for the refractometers in actually that you can get from the Kōanga website.
Beautiful. Yeah. So it's just measuring the amount of stuff in the juice, really, and the more nutrients in the leaf, in the plant, the more stuff in the juice, the more the light bends. And so it's a really simple way of testing relative plant health or crop quality.
One of the questions that I've got around that is that the people who taught me in the beginning how to do that, which is a very long time ago now, and they were consultants, biological consultants, they said that you need to rub your hands and squash the leaves up for the same amount of time every time you do it, and it should be 2 minutes. And then more recently, I think I've heard from someone who was a student of Nicole Masters that you shouldn't do that at all. You just put it in the refractometer and squeeze it. It's really hard to do that with some leaves. So I've always rubbed it for 2 minutes, and so you get the juice out more easily. What do you think?
Well, there's some things like fruit trees, like apple leaves, and there's some leaves which are really difficult to get drop of juice out of 100%. I would say if you're theoretically following the principles of science, you do the same thing every time. So the lettuce leaf or a tomato leaf or a zucchini leaf or a carrot or a beet, it's not going to be hard to get the juice out.
No.
If it is an apple or maybe ryegrass, or it depends on the season and how dry it is, it'll be more difficult. This is a garlic press. I tell people to stick a penny in there. I got a penny in here. It's kind of stuck, but if you stick a penny in there, that'll keep the pulp from coming out. These are really cheap. Sometimes they break. When I sell them for the BFA, we have like a vice grips, and with the vice grips, you can dial it in, and that thing will get juice out of anything. But those cost like $60 for the vice grips. So,
in New Zealand, the best garlic crush you can get is with Xylus one.
Yeah.
So I've got another question that I think is worth answering on this as well. is
Yeah.
that my understanding is that all of the BRICS charts that are online, the comparative charts, are based on leaf testing. And a lot of people go out and because if you test the leaf of an apple tree and the apple on an apple tree, they've got quite different BRICSs.
Yep.
So if you are comparing apple, if you like what is it? Are they leaf tests? Because
No.
they're not. So
when the BRICS chart, I mean, Kerry Reams, you mentioned Kerry Reams at the beginning. He was a clairvoyant. He was a very interesting guy. Reams' biological theory of ionization. The story goes that he was I don't know, not a contemporary, but met Einstein.
yeah,
And it's like,
yeah,
good job, Al, putting taking matter apart. He's talking about the atom bomb and
Yeah.
things like that. How do you put it back together again? Just kind of being a
Yeah.
cocky kid. And Al said, "That's your job, Kerry. Figure it out."
yeah.
And he did, and he was touched, with some specialness, and the Reams biological theory of ionization is a really, really powerful stream of thought, which is largely lost. There are some people who follow it and are aware of it, but many don't. It's applicable for human health as well. And he's the guy who popularized the use of the refractometer, popularized the use of the conductivity meter. He's an absolute legend that's people should know about. But the BRICS chart that he put together, that sort of poor, average, good, excellent, and every number, like a carrot's got different numbers and a tomato's got different numbers and lettuce.
Yeah.
That has to do with the part of the plant you eat. So if you're somebody buying food, what you want to do is you want to take the carrots from here and the carrots from here and the carrots from there, squish them, get a drop of juice out, look at the number, and you can see on the BRICS chart that Kerry Reams put together, poor, average, good, excellent. And that should tell you to buy from this farm at the farmer's market, or that farm, or this grocery store, or that grocery store, or this brand label, or that brand label. This is a really good way for people to discern like what's better and what's worse of what you add to you.
So I've always understood, and I was told in the beginning that it was a leaf analysis chart, and I've only ever done leaves because I thought that you obviously can't. So I would say that our BRICSs are way higher than what we've recorded them as, actually, because the carrot is higher than the BRICS of the carrot is higher than the leaf. So how the hell do you get the juice out of a carrot with you can't. You've got to use, is that why you're using those?
Garlic press.
You can do it in a garlic press.
Use the garlic press.
Well, that's
In
interesting.
like
I've learned something
5
new.
seconds. An apple, a cucumber, a carrot, a potato, lettuce, broccoli, anything. Stick it in the garlic press, stick a penny in here, squish it, drop of juice comes out, boom, you get your reading. It's so simple. The target for a leaf of the plant while it's growing is 12. The target for the part that you eat is on the BRICS chart. Any plant, anywhere, while it's growing, 12 is your target. What is excellent for the tomato versus the grape versus the carrot is defined in that BRICS chart.
Yeah, I've only ever done it with leaves, so that's going to be an exciting new thing. Go out and I'll have to tell everybody.
We'll have to post some of those results. That's fantastic to see. So one of the other components that I feel like doesn't really get connected, which would be so awesome to dive into a little bit, is the level of nutrient density. Does that correlate to flavor? And if so, how?
Directly and completely. I mean, I like to say, whether you call it nature or call it God, somebody directed 30% of our DNA to the function of our nose and our tongue.
Wow.
Like a massive percent of our operating system is focused on smell and taste. And that's because like what you eat connects to how healthy your children are. If you eat junk, you become less healthy, your children become less healthy, you denature, degrade, die off. Those things we call flavor and aroma, those complex compounds, those polyphenols and terpenoids, and there's all kinds of fancy names for them, but basically it's taste and smell and aroma, are only built at high levels in a plant when everything else is functioning well. And so when a peach doesn't taste like a peach, or an apple doesn't taste like an apple, you can have sweet, but sweet is not flavor, right? Simple sugar is not flavor. Flavor is that at aroma, that like exceptional experience. Like the people that bother themselves with wine and coffee and I don't know, stuff like that. They're like really fancy about flavor, right? Like a high quality wine's got all these notes and blah, blah, blah. Like we should pay attention to our carrots that way. That's anyway, yes.
I
Flavor
feel
and
like
aroma
it's
and nutrition
because,
are the same thing. It's
yeah.
nose and our tongue are nature's nutrient meters, and that's what you should trust.
But we have to remember at the same time that we've all grown up in this industrial world, and we've come to equate sugar, like simple sugar sweetness, with tasting good. It's a good, I mean, we had a really good example here this autumn where we had 60 different apple cultivars out on the table, and we had people here who'd never eaten an apple that wasn't from the supermarket, and they didn't like them. Like they've got so many flavors and so many different nuanced flavors and textures and tastes, and they'd never ever tried any of them ever before, and they couldn't connect with it. So this like, if you're addicted to sugar and various other chemicals in the shop, the way that you taste things is different.
And we are denatured more and more, and we're like, disconnected from our instincts more and more. But those things can be like, I would say, like, if you just remove yourself from the city reality for a week or 2 weeks, if you stop eating processed product, if you start breathing fresh air and drinking good water and eating real food, all that stuff will reset rapidly. Right. We're just backed up with junk right now, and we just need to take a solid minute
Oh
off.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we really are. Because when I was in my last business, a fermentation business, and I would every week on a Saturday run a farmer's market stall and give out tastings to people. And it blew my mind how much of a variation there was in people's palates, because what tasted sweet or good or like well-rounded and complex to one person tasted completely different to the next person. And I think like I've never felt that more starkly than when if you do like a cleanse or a detox or something and you cut out all sugar, and maybe you do that for a few days or a week or 10 days, however long you do it for, and then you like eat a raspberry, and the sweetness of that one raspberry just like blows all your senses out. Like you become so sensitive to the aroma and flavor of this like precious fruit. And I think because our palates have all been hijacked, well, not all of our palates, but a lot of people's palates have been totally hijacked by what I will get in trouble for calling junk food, because we shouldn't put the word food on the end of junk. It is junk. But our palates as a culture have been hijacked by junk. Like the industrial food producers really know what they're doing. They know they have biochemists who literally create compounds to make things smell and taste in a way that hijack your palates. That's, literally bypassing nature's design. So exactly what you just said, if we can somehow remove those things from our diet and reconnect back to nature, then our palate also resets itself, and we can then begin to taste flavor as it should taste.
and
So
what we're
yeah,
going to find is a lot of what you've got to purchase in the store is of pretty damn poor quality. When you actually start tasting the carrots and the store and the raspberries and the peaches and the apples, is like, they're just not that impressive. And that's what's unfortunate, is like getting your hands on high quality food is an extraordinarily difficult endeavor. For me, becoming a father, I was like, I have to be a farmer because I understand the critical importance of feeding my children well. And it's impossible to feed my children well if I don't grow my own food.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they become parents, there are two times in your life when you step right outside of the box that we're in, and we make big change. And one's when you become parents, and one's when you become grandparents. And they're very important times. Yeah.
So essentially, the health and nutrient density and Brix level absolutely does correlate to flavor and health. Like that's a given.
Yeah.
And we're in this process, which is a very complex one, of trying to empirically define nutrient density. And it may be a fool's errand, it may be hubristic, but like the idea is, can we at least begin to try to empirically define 1 in 100, like we have in Celsius. There's 1 in 100, right? And like we've got scales. Richter has a scale. Like, can we develop a proper peer-reviewed, published scale of quality in food, and then be able to build tools that test it? And our idea with the, with a spectrum, with the bionutrient meter, is to have it be a flash of light thing. So you can just go and flash the light of the carrot or the steak or the milk and get the reading, as opposed to having to squish it, because you aren't really supposed to squish things in the store before you buy them. And there's no data, peer-reviewed published papers saying that Brix is what we're talking about, right? Actually, if we're trying to play along with the game of the dominant paradigm, which is science, then you have to actually formally go through the process. And so what I say to people, to answer your question, Amber, is if our definition of nutrient density comes up not aligned with flavor, we have the wrong definition. We didn't do a good enough job, because I'm pretty sure that that thing we call aroma and flavor and taste is how we're wired to perceive. But there's one other point, which is that all bodies are different. And you can't really have a uniform, perfect for everybody. Some people have this imbalance or that imbalance, and their body doesn't really want this thing right now, it wants that thing right now. And so that's what that's what their tongue is telling them.
Yeah.
For me right now, this is not good. And that may be part of what was happening with your taste testing in the kimchis and sauerkrauts. It was like, these plants or these spices were really good for me, but those ones I don't need, or whatever. So yeah, just, I mean, in the process of creating a 1 to 100 standard, we understand we're simplifying it past the level of, it can never be perfect, because everybody's unique, and your tongue is the best thing. Your tongue is the best thing. And
Yeah.
you
And your
putting
seed is the best
putting
thing.
your seed in your mouth before you plant it is the best thing.
Yeah.
And then who needs to buy anything, because so it's all hacks to get ourselves out of the system and back into nature, so we don't die off, as far as I'm concerned. But understand them as sort of just steps, not solutions. Anyway, I love the definition.
Someone just commented in the chat box, which I think is a good, point, is that, so an apricot with little flavor is not because it was picked before it was ripe. And I think, there's always little nuances like that. Like, a lot of the supermarket produce also doesn't have flavor, because not only it's the industrial food system, right? Not only is it picked before it's ripe, but it's also often things like kiwi fruit and apples and various things are stored in cold storage for months, if not even up to a year sometimes. Like, it's wild how long things are stored. And they've proven scientifically that the longer, or maybe let's put it in the positive light, the fresher something is, the more, Dan, tell us.
With Amber, with fruit, until a fruit is ripening, it's often simple sugars, and polysaccharides are what are formed in the fruit in the ripening process in the last few days of ripening. And the polysaccharides are what we need as humans for our bodies. And in fact, we won't have a good immune system without a lot of polysaccharides and different kinds of polysaccharides. So all our fruit is being picked before those polysaccharides have formed, and it's going into cold storage. So it's no wonder it tastes
It's an
like
industrial model. It's the industrial model. It's part of what's necessary for people to live away from nature.
Yeah.
To live away from nature, you have to denature yourself. So if you want to be denatured, keep living away from nature. It's just if you don't want to be denatured, you have to get back into relationship with nature. You can't have, I mean, I don't know, maybe if you're really, really rich and you can have somebody who's your personal, servant go and get stuff right from a farm and bring it to you, you can do it. But broadly, these conveniences or whatever are just
killing us.
They're not. Yeah, it's not all uniform. Carrots are not uniform. These things are not uniform. Like, I mean, certainly you can slaughter a pig and freeze the meat, and it'll stay pretty good for a while. You can pick blueberries ripe and freeze them, right? And they'll be good for a while. But keeping things fresh is all these different nuances and continuums. There's just a bunch of pieces of the puzzle. And so I would generally recommend a frozen blueberry over a fresh blueberry. Like, because usually they're frozen when they're picked ripe, and there's like a ton of them, and they can't put them all through the fresh supply chain, and so they do pick them ripe and they freeze them. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways of thinking about this. And those of us who grew up on homesteads where we froze and fermented and dehydrated and stuff like that know about this stuff because that's how we were raised. But I mean, on my parents' farm, we bought beans and rice and salt, you know, not much else. It was store-bought food. We
So
refer to it
currently,
as
the
store-bought,
yeah.
kind of judgmentally.
So currently, we've got this fantastic little tool, the refractometer, to measure Brix levels. But Dan, tell us about the bionutrient meter, which you've developed, and where you're at with that, and how, like, if you can explain what it is, and then the ripple effect of what that can do to the food system is just so incredible.
It's a little ray gun. I mean,
I've been waiting for one of these for about 20 years.
I've been fantasizing about it for at least 15. So it uses the principle of it's called spectroscopy, and spectroscopy is it's a whatever, a piece of science. And it basically, Alpha Centauri. Alpha Centauri is a star. People may have heard about Alpha Centauri. It's the closest star to us. It's not the sun. It's like, I don't know, 6 light years away or something. Light year, decent distance, right? And if you ask any astrophysicist what is Alpha Centauri made up of, they'll say it's 51% hydrogen, 48% helium, and 1% other gases. These levels and ratios. Duh. Give me a hard question. You ask an astrophysicist, what's this atmosphere of this planet 10,000 light years away made up of? Well, that planet has methane in its atmosphere. 10,000 light years away. How the hell did you figure out what something 10,000 light years away is made up of? No one has sent a probe more than 18 light hours away. How could you send something 10,000 light years away and back? We didn't. We use what's called spectroscopy. So spectroscopy says that every element in chemistry is a vibration in physics. Copper, you've been told copper's a thing with protons and neutrons and electrons. It vibrates at a certain frequency. Protein, every compound in chemistry is a vibration. Protein vibrates at a certain frequency. Vibration is light. So basically, you're taking a picture of the light coming off of a star, and you can read what it's made up of. That's called spectroscopy. So the idea is basically, if you can take a picture of something 10,000 light years away and see what it's made up of with a flash of light, why can't you take a picture of something a millimeter away and see what's made up of? And you can. So that's the vision, is that we basically build these little handheld gizmos that people can use at point of purchase to flash a light at all the choices of food in front of you. And you say, burp, burp, 20 out of 100, burp, burp, 40 out of 100, burp, burp, 80 out of 100. And you take the 80 and leave the 20. And maybe you even upload onto Facebook and Instagram where the 80s were. And so everybody who's your friend can go get them. And then all that leaves the shelf and the 20s stay there. And pretty soon the retailer goes to the wholesaler, and the wholesaler goes to the packer, and the packer goes to the farmer and says, we want more of that, and we don't want any of that. And so effectively we use the market, which is money, which seems to drive the world, for better or for worse. Money drives the world. So we use money to incentivize people to focus on working well with nature, which sequesters carbon, which improves ecosystem function, which reverses, extremes of climate, which creates a dynamic where we don't need fertilizers and insecticides and fungicides, which means we don't buy the products of agribusiness, which means agribusiness goes out of business, which means they no longer control the lobbying schemes, which means food's more flavorful and nutritious, which means people are healthier, which means they don't have chronic diseases anymore, which means we don't need pharmaceutical industry, which means people are all, functioning more well, and so they're better beings in all the structures of culture. The idea is the ripple effects of basically being able to choose the good stuff and leave the bad stuff are that we can, with the money we spend every day to care for our families and ourselves, profoundly positively affect the planet.
Yeah.
We're not fighting anything. We're just simply doing a better job of caring for those we love. And it happens to have ripple effects, which could be absolutely, totally profound. So that was the thesis. And that was the vision. And we started on this process in 2016, sort of putting a strategy together. And we built the first meter in 2017 and built a bunch of labs from 2018 on till 2020 and proved that nutrient variation was massive. And then it seemed to be connected to soil health, not to genetics, not to soil type, not to point of purchase, not to certification label. It was a level of life in the soil that was the predominant causal factor in nutrient variation in food. You could take any genetic, any variety of seed and put it in this soil and it'll do well, and that soil will do poorly. Like hybrid seed in a good soil will do better than that hybrid seed in a poor soil. Like it may be true that optimized, renatured, rematriated soil, a seed is going to do better than a hybrid, but you can't say that just because it's hybrid it means it's bad, right? You put the high quality seed in a dead dirt, and you're going to get low quality food. So seed is a piece of the puzzle, but the foundational thing is life. The life in the soil is the foundational thing, and creating a dynamic where that flourishes is the mastery of the art of farming or gardening or land stewardship or whatever your term is. But yeah, so this is the meter we built, and this is a second generation version. It's calibrated to 10 crops. Now, listen really carefully. It is not testing nutrient density. It tests individual nutrients like polyphenols or antioxidants or things like that, which are interesting, valuable. This is published in Nature. We got this thing published in like the journals, the scientific journal Nature. This thing works. It's a handheld, consumer-priced flash of light nutrient meter. The first question was, is it possible to build a handheld ray gun? Yes, at a consumer price point. That tests nutrients non-invasively with a flash of light. We did that. Now the question is, what is quality? What is nutrient density? Until you've defined 1 in 100, you can't calibrate a meter to test 1 in 100. Like there is no definition right now of biochemically the levels and ratios of the nutrients, the copper and the zinc and the polyphenols and the vitamins and the enzymes and the fatty acids and there's all these different nutrients in a carrot, in a cucumber, in beef, in milk. And until you've got a definition of the levels and ratios that correlate with 80 out of 100 and 20 out of 100, you can't build a meter that tests that. And that's an expensive science project. And we're a nonprofit educational NGO, right? We are doing things in the commons for the greater good. We're not a taking investment company locking up proprietary data. We're saying this has to be information that's in the commons. Strategically, what is quality has to be a thing that can be understood and shared and agreed upon. If it's black boxed, if it's proprietary like the Facebook algorithm, then you shouldn't trust us. You shouldn't trust anybody who hides their answer for what 1 in 100 is. And so we're stuck at this point. We're not stuck, but we're at this point in the process of needing to raise about $25 million to categorically define nutrient density across the board in 20 different crops. So yeah, it's been a long process. We've gotten a long ways so far. We've proved a bunch of things, but we're not done yet. If anybody has
on the journey,
we are on the path.
We're on the
We're on the path. Absolutely.
fantastic stuff.
Yeah. So
Yeah, well, we've just hit the 4:30 mark, so I'd just love to encourage everybody who's listening to, if you've got some questions, we're just going to have a little bit more chat first, but if you have some questions, chuck them in the Q&A box specifically rather than the chat box, and we can answer some questions in a moment, which would be awesome. There are actually some questions there already. One was, when will you discuss how we can know what to do and when? So just to say to everybody, there are the most incredible resources on both the Bionutrient Food Association website, which I will put in a link and email out to everybody after this, and also on the Kōanga website, and just really focusing on the soil. So essentially, like, the end product of this bionutrient meter, the beginning of that you're measuring starts in the soil. And there are some amazing resources around that on Dan's website and the Kōanga website with the online education platform and various things. So consumer empowerment, like, okay, so we're on a trajectory to get this bionutrient meter sorted. There's some amazing resources for people to be able to buy the heritage seeds from Kōanga and other places around the world. We can measure bricks. So what's next? How do people at home really empower themselves? How can they help drive this change? what are your thoughts around that?
One other thing, I've been thinking about that a lot. It's really tricky when you're buying from a supermarket. Maybe Dan's got some ideas, but when you're buying from people in a farmer's market, I would just start asking, what is the bricks? Do you know the bricks? Do you know what the nutrient density of your food is? And a lot of them never heard of it and don't know it, but at least if people start asking them, they'll start thinking about it and start looking into it. I like just getting conscious about it. It's a good start.
I'll one up you on that. I say, how about we take the power and figure it out ourselves? How about we come together as citizens, citizen scientists, caretakers of our communities and our cultures, and we get one refractometer, which costs $20 or whatever it costs in New Zealand dollars. Your New Zealand dollars aren't worth a lot, or they're worth less than the American dollars.
Yeah.
It was 12. This one was 12 British pounds last month is what it cost brand new. So whatever. If one of your friends buys one refractometer and each of you goes shopping, let's say once a week, do you ever hang out with your friends? Do you ever like get together and have a bottle of wine and, enjoy time with each other? Bring your shopping. Bring a cucumber, a carrot, a zucchini, a head of lettuce, and each of you can bring your shopping from different stores, different farmers markets, different CSA bags, and test together. What we're trying to do at the BFA, what I really want to launch this year, is what we're calling a BRICS campaign, which is basically a database where anybody on the planet can input the information of what the BRICS readings were of what they found in their shopping. And our thought is, if we, the people, can begin to actually do the small amount of work of testing, hanging out with your friends, call it a, you're hanging out with your friends. You can call it a social movement if you want, if it'll make you feel better. Then we begin to upload this information onto the internet, put it in Facebook, put it in Instagram, put it in whatever your profile platform of choice is, and tell your friends. I think that's going to cause the farmers at the farmers market to pay attention. I think if you ask them as a farmer, if I knew people were testing BRICS readings and I wasn't quite sure that mine were as good as they'd like to be, and I don't quite know where everybody else in the farmers market's at, I might focus a little bit more on nutrition than I currently do. So I think it's a little bit of creative tension there, but I think those of us who care about our health and our children's health, one thing we can do is just start discerning with our friends where better stuff is and where worse stuff is. And you'll be really impressed about stores that you thought because you were charging more, it was better. Stuff really isn't. And, maybe somebody's going to find good somewhere. It's almost impossible to find excellent. Excellent pretty much doesn't exist. Sorry. And that's what we try to do with our courses, is teach people how to produce excellent quality bricks. And it's a bit of work. It sounds like Kay's definitely pretty far down the rabbit hole. There are people around, but not as many as you'd like them to be. Sorry, that was just a response to what Kay said about the refractometer.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I love it.
Question was, what else can we do?
There's lots of funny. What else can we do? What can we do?
What can we do to raise the bricks?
No,
or
just
in general.
In general, empower people
consciousness and
drive
awareness.
this thing.
Well, I talk about it all the time. I mean, everyone just normalizing the conversation. So it's up to all of us to normalize conversations about nutrient density and health, and doing things like this with people. I mean, I don't know how many people are online here. There were hundreds of people that signed up.
We had 600 sign up. I think it's only about 150 that
so
are on.
I mean, having these kinds of conversations, and then everyone goes home and has these conversations with their own circle of friends. It's like awareness is the first thing. So, and I would say the thing that will keep you going and inspire you to keep going is to start doing it. Just get some good seeds and just start learning how to do it. It's like a very, very powerful process. When reconnecting is like, whoa, it's like electricity. Yeah, it is actually electricity.
It's some kind of electricity, the current of consciousness.
Yeah, just doing it. Like even start with some seeds that you can relate to, or your whānau can relate to, like they've in your whakapapa somewhere that you know you might want to start growing again, and then you pass them on down and you tell the stories to your kids and your grandchildren and all of those. There are lots of ways. Sometimes it's just a seed, sometimes it just might be, you know, you're going to be parents soon. So I mean, if I was going to be a parent soon, I would be wanting to read Weston Price's
Nourishing
book.
Traditions.
Yeah,
Yep.
Nourishing Traditions, and Weston Price's book.
Nutrition and Physical Degeneration.
Yeah, that book
Weston
is
Price's book. For anybody that's going to be a parent,
yeah,
you're thinking about it.
Yeah, and it's just
100%.
as important for the men as it is for the women.
Both, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, really key. I mean, the two books that we have here, which are kind of where our principles and laws of nature come from, is Weston Price's book, and Beddoes' book, which is translated Kerry Reams.
Yep.
Nourishment Homegrown, it's called.
Yeah.
It's hard to get, I think. Yeah. So like seeds, for me, it was the seed. Like the seeds were what inspired me, and the seeds have been my teacher. And working with the seeds, I mean, I've spent years doing permaculture. I'm a permaculture designer, and so I like processes. Like loads of information is just completely overwhelming. You need a process, like steps. So all the work that I do around how to grow nutrient dense food and how to design a forest garden and how to design a nutrient dense diet are all based on start with principles, laws of nature, LORES of Indigenous people, like pattern languages in the natural world. Learn about as much as you can, which in a world we live in, we aren't taught any of that. Like we're not taught about the laws of nature or even principles of science unless you're in a science class. And then you've got to go through a creative process and design, you know, figure out how you're going to get where you want to go. And so step by step things are, for me, are really important. Design process, and there's plenty of that in our resources that we've got here. I was looking at your
Awesome.
the outline of your course that you teach, Dan, and yeah, I mean you've got a clear process in just the same way, and I think, you know,
it's principles. I call it principles of biological systems. How did nature evolve things to work?
Yeah.
And only when you are understanding how nature evolved things can you be in harmony with nature.
Yeah.
And if you're just repeating what somebody told you, or everybody says add compost, therefore compost must be right. All the cool kids use compost. I'm like, I say, where in nature do you see compost? I mean, just because everyone says use compost doesn't make it true.
No, I know there's been a big journey around compost.
It's a big one. It's a big one. And like, step back, you know, understand, for me, you know, nature has the thing figured out. And the more you align with her, the more fulfilled and everything well works in your life. And the more you're out of line, the more life sucks. But
in New Zealand, sorry, you finish.
Well, no, I was gonna say, one thing is, you know, I have taught this course for 17 years, and there are numerous recordings of it on YouTube. So, you know, if people want at some point to have me come and teach a course here in New Zealand, I would be completely honored. But until then, I run an educational organization, and all of our stuff is on YouTube for free. So that is there and available. But I would say primarily, the first thing to do is to take a decision, is to choose with your life force, with your free will, to direct your attention in a direction. And if you're just going to sit back and think this is great and then move on to something else, well, okay, I guess you don't have enough. I don't know. I don't know. Like you have to actually own it and direct yourself and control your mind and stop putting your attention and energy on things that are out of tune, because as long as you're doing that, you're not going to be in tune, and it really does involve a bit of mental hygiene. But working with nature, being with nature is all remarkably simple. It's actually costs less, you know, like all these conveniences of life require our full life force of being wage slaves to have. And so if your objective is to be a wage slave that's denatured, then keep going in that trajectory. But if you're saying I want an off ramp because I don't want to die because I'm physiologically degenerate, I mean I'm sort of creating a polarity, but like we have to take responsibility for ourselves. No one else is going to, right? The system as it currently sits is designed to suck our life force and is succeeding brilliantly. And so it's
Up to
our power.
us.
It's our power, right?
We are the ones we've been
If
waiting
we give it
for.
away, we gave it away, but it was us that gave it away. So take responsibility for your attention and intention are your power, right? Where you put your energy is where your energy goes, but you put it there.
And the cool thing is when you do that, there's lots of support out there.
Amazing.
Yeah, I just
Everything
found
is right
that.
there. It'll come flourishing at you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in just the same way as one of my big learnings here, and one of the most incredible experiences here on this land, is we've been here for 15 years now, and about 4 or 5 years after we came, it was just a big sheep paddock. It was one big sheep paddock. There were hardly any trees at all, and we planted miles of gardens and miles of trees, and we noticed the insect population started to go through the roof. And then about 2 years later, maybe 3 years later, we noticed the birds were coming in.
Yep.
And so we planted the trees, and I mean, we knew that was a good thing to do, but we didn't understand all the exact things that were going to happen on down the line from planting the trees. And there's so many species of birds here now that weren't here when we came, and the numbers are going higher and higher every year. And that's in this land, and New Zealand is bird country. It's like used to be totally covered in forest and New Zealand native bush, full of birds, full of insects, and that's where the phosphate cycling happened. So you cut the trees down and you got no phosphate cycling happening anymore. So my dream is that every garden is surrounded by a forest garden full of insects and birds. And then over time you start, rebuilding all nature's ways of cycling nutrients, and the whole thing becomes a lot easier. But that ain't going to happen it'll take more than one generation to do that.
I think we can start, and we can amazing progress can happen quite rapidly. There's a movie which I think shows what you're just talking about quite well. It's called The Biggest Little Farm, and I mean, they obviously had tens of millions of dollars to throw around, but they do a really good job of capturing that experience of like taking a denuded, worn, weathered piece of land and starting to do the things and seeing how nature came back and revitalized, and it was a beautiful thing. And I think that's our role and our responsibility. I mean, in North America, the indigenous people, they say the role of the human is caretaker, and the law of the seventh generation is every decision must be taken with the best possible result for the seventh generation in the future as the primary criteria.
Yeah, it's the same in this land. Kaitiaki is the word for caregiver.
Okay, I don't know the traditions here, but I think it seems like a good idea to me. The savanna ecosystem where you got the trees and you got everything else growing and up and down, and you get the optimal diversity of canopy layers is, a managed ecosystem where the human animal is very proactively optimizing vitality. And the more we can do that, the more well all will be in the world. And I think, people are concerned about climate change and desertification and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, the ability to reverse climate change, the ability to take brown desertified lands and turn them green again is so simple. It's so inexpensive. We have the capacity to rejuvenate this planet.
Yeah.
And we absolutely have the capacity.
And
the question is, how is each of us going to take responsibility for our own lives? Like, if you're ever busy thinking bad about anyone else, like what I say to people is, are you walking on water? Because if you're not walking on water, stop throwing stones, right? It doesn't do anybody any good to like start saying bad things about other people. The question is, the only thing you can control is yourself. The only thing you can control is yourself. So take responsibility for your life and bring that into as deep of harmony as you can. And the ripple effects of that will be powerful. But yeah, throwing stones at others, yeah, complaining, being depressed, like, I don't know. I guess you can do it if you want to, but you're not helping. You're not helping, right? If you want to help, take responsibility for yourself. So anyway, yeah,
Oh.
that's what I'd say.
Okay, fantastic. So we've got a couple of questions, or one question that has come up multiple times is around tilling. To till or not to till?
You want to go first?
Well, it's been a really interesting one for me. So we've been practicing biointensive gardening for a really long time. We studied with John Jevons and and it wasn't until and every year my soil kept compacting. So every year I would use a U-bar or a fork to aerate it. I wouldn't turn anything over, but I would aerate it. When I started using Ramia wood chip in the garden, the fungi started to grow.
Yeah.
And I've never had to do it ever since. I do nothing at all other than just put compost on and plant. So, and the air stays in there. So I think that's what our goal is the least disturbance, the better. But I don't think you'll get there unless you take some very significant positive steps towards building the life of building fungi in the soil. You've got to feed the fungi. So it's a thing that will happen automatically if you get the conditions right. So yeah, I think it's obviously best not to till, but you've got to figure out what's your way of doing that. And for me, in my garden, it was using Ramia wood chip.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say tillage is more of those like binaries, thou shalt or thou shalt not. Like in every circumstance, there's a appropriate tool in the toolbox. And in some cases, tillage is a great way to shift an environment from one dynamic to another. It's a great way to integrate minerals, which the soil may be denuded of. And so there's so many nuances in tillage, and
Yeah,
and everything has to come down to what does nature need? And in this case, strategically, nature's suffering because the soil's totally tight. There's no minerals, there's no air. And so loosening it up and integrating a bunch of
yeah,
stuff is going to be
yeah,
strategically very wise. And then thereafter, once nature's actually functioning well, of course, you want to minimize disturbance, but
yeah,
a shallow tilthing at 1 inch of depth can be a very efficient way to prepare a seed bed from
yeah,
something that has plants that are 10 feet tall, really, really efficiently. And you can convert that to a new planting immediately. So, yeah, it's not about thou shalt do this or thou shalt not do that. It's about what does nature need? What does the land
yes,
need? And
yeah.
let's give nature what she needs the
So
best way we can.
I think that's a really, really important, and I need to qualify what I said before. So basically, vegetables don't grow unless there's 50% air in the soil. So if you've got really compacted soil, then you need to start by aerating it. Like we double dug everything here, and we double
That's a
dug
lot of
everything in
work.
Kaiwaka, huge amounts of garden, but we've never had to do it ever since.
Yeah.
So you actually have to create, like if you've got compacted soil, you haven't got the right microbes, you haven't got enough air, you can't manage the water properly, you'll never do a good job of growing vegetables. So
Yep.
you've got
Yep.
to change the situation to start with.
And understand that our lands are deeply traumatized,
Yeah.
right? They're in most cases, it's not really soil, it's much more dirt. It's in rough shape. And that has been the effect of human action, is to have a negative impact. The effect of human action can be to have a positive impact. We just have to understand what we're doing and choose a different path. And so on my farm, when I bought my land, the first thing I did was broadcast a bunch of minerals. And then I came through with the tiller like 4 times to get down 3 inches because it was just tight, light colored, hard dirt. I made my beds. I, put the drip tape down. I inoculated. I put the seeds in. I mulched. And literally 2 months later, it was chocolate cake. It was complete chocolate cake. It was just transformed, but tillage was a strategic piece of that process to facilitate. And then thereafter, no, a very shallow disturbance, if any. But yeah, you basically need to understand. I mean, in England, I've spent a lot of time in England recently, and there's this like no dig gardening, and it's a big thing. I was like, oh, I'm a no dig gardener. I'm God's greatest gift. I'm like, if you take a lawn that's really tight and hard and you just don't dig, the roots can't reach down into the soil. The microbes can't breathe. So It's everything's in context.
Yeah,
Um,
great.
anyway.
Fantastic. Okay. There was a question here, Kay, what are you doing with your soil now that you were not doing under the organics regime?
Well, we are way beyond organic, I would have thought by now, but there's never been a there's no label to put on it. So that's what we're waiting for Dan to get his label organized. We've been waiting
Get
for
to it, Kittredge. Stop slacking.
We're biological farmers. We're working with the natural world and we're building life. Yeah, and we are testing it with, I mean, we're making all of our own fertilizers. We are making, one of the really exciting things that we're doing is, I've been very challenged by the whole compost thing, and a lot of the biological agriculture consultants that write in Acres USA basically say, they tell, like when people say to them, what's your advice? What are your 5 big tips for, like, you know, growing nutrient dense food? And they, in the first 5 things is always don't use compost. And I couldn't understand that for a long time, but I believe that we do need to make compost, but because we've got, I mean, it seems like a really sensible thing for home gardeners to be doing, and we've got all these the waste and weeds and everything, but we have to make it in such a way that that we've got some kind of rough idea of what minerals are in it, and they're balanced, and then it becomes the fertilizer for our garden beds. So we're adding bone ash from our own animals, which adds the phosphate and available phosphate and calcium, which is what's missing in our soils. There's very little phosphate in any plant material apart from lupins that we can easily access. So we've got recipes for making compost now, which balance the minerals and get the minerals right, which means you don't have to buy fertilizer. So the compost becomes the fertilizer. We're making the 3 things we're doing in our gardens is we're using the Johnson Sioux compost as an inoculant. It's got we're getting incredible results off the top of all their charts with our microbes, in fact, with the microbes in the Johnson Sioux. So we're using that as an inoculant. We're making intelligent compost. And we're doing 4 things. We're making fish hydrolysate, which we use as microbe food, and we're making Bionutrient, which is a recipe that's sort of come from someone in Mexico, I think, which you can make yourselves with your own on-farm ingredients as a foliar feed, which always puts the bricks up too when you put it on. So that's what we're doing, those 4 things. And I actually think I'm discouraging people now from even getting soil tests, because I think we need to have some faith and some trust in the natural processes, and in like most people aren't going to get a soil test, most home gardeners anyway. So we need systems that don't require soil tests. And so long as you're doing like adding microbes, you're raising the carbon levels by making compost and making sure it's got the right minerals in it. You're foliar feeding with some kind of a wide range of nutrients, especially the ones you know that the plants need, and this land is mainly phosphate and calcium, and you just like you work. The other thing is, in our compost we're putting ramia wood chip, and trees are the earth's mineral cyclers. Like, how did we end up with topsoil and living topsoil in the past? It's just like the end result of leaves rotting and insects and animals and animal manure and fungi, and it's just like it happens all by itself. So the closer we get back to like letting that happen, the less you're dependent on understanding all the science and getting soil tests and all of that. So I mean, if I was a commercial grower, I'd probably be getting a soil test, but I don't think home gardeners necessarily need to, so long as you make good decisions about what you're doing. And so far I've been doing what we're doing now, which is well documented on our online workshops and our workshops that we do here, and in the booklets, which has all recently been updated. And I'm getting pretty high Brixes, high results with the microbiometer, which measures the fungi and the bacteria in the soil. And I feel like I'm just kind of letting nature kind of do it. I'm just kind of doing sensible things. So yeah, I don't think in the end it's that hard. I've just been through this journey of like learning the science, which was hard for me because I hadn't ever done science, learning some of the basic science so that I could, and getting a lot of testing done, and then creating a pattern language or like a process out of that. So it becomes a simple process. And I'm pretty happy with where we're at with that. It's definitely improving the soil every year, which we can see, and it's raising the Brixes, and it feels like we're, you know, things are getting better and better. The life, we're building life. And you know, that's the best we can ever do, really, is to see that we're building life and to feel that.
Beautiful.
I would love to hear from you, Dan. There's a few questions actually from people, not specifically directed at home gardening and garden beds, but how with respect to the aeration in the soil and things not being compacted, how do you bring the life back into the soil on farms?
Yeah, I can address that. I want to just follow up on what Kay said. I think I would say you ask your land what it needs, and you don't ever have a recipe, but you engage in as deep a conversation as possible. And if you can engage, you know, some people use a pendulum, some people use a dowsing rod, some people use kinesiology.
Yeah.
Some people actually know how to talk to nature spirits and things like that, and aren't afraid of having that conversation. Certainly, you can envision a soil test as a frame of that. There's all kinds of ways of testing the leaves or whatever. But yeah, I try to stay away from recipes entirely, and I think in general, the more you can engage that conversation with the land about what she needs at any point in time. For me, oftentimes things come to me, right? If you're out there enough in the land, like things pop into your head. It just kind of, where did that thought come from? That's a random thought. No, it was the nature spirits trying to get through my thick skull, and they got it in there. So I could doubt it or skeptically resist it, or I could just try it out and experiment. And experimentation is massive, right? Like if you got an idea, try it out somewhere. See what happens. What's it gonna hurt? Don't tell anybody if you're self-conscious about it, you know, like just see for yourself. Engage that relationship. Imagine it's a living being. Imagine your land is alive and sentient and loving and trying to and traumatized and struggling, and we're all trying to work to find love together, and like that's the objective. And so I think the more you can get into that state of mind, the better things are going to work. But yeah, I think the question of compaction, I mean, there's a million different causal factors. Really, you have to understand what the cause is. And it's possible that animals running over the land, you know, happened, but, you know, in many cases, there'll be a calcium magnesium ratio imbalance. And that, you know, I mean, so stepping back, all the way back, all the way back, all the way back, and figuring out, you know, root causes and systemic solutions. Oftentimes we'll say, well, the soil was tilled, therefore X, Y, and Z happened. Well, the soil was tilled, but also a bunch of other things happened over 150 years. You know, those cows were over there, but also a bunch of other things happened over the past 150 years. When was the last time that this land was a, you know, a diverse polyculture climax forest ecosystem? Okay, that was a while ago, probably. There's a bunch of things that have happened to the land since, which have caused it to not be an optimal system function. And to ascribe cause to one thing that you may be aware of that happened in the time frame that you're present with is to be, I don't know, egotistical. Like you think you know this is what the cause was. And so the first thing is to step way back and look at the systemic dynamics. And I always say, you know, I'm not going to give anybody any advice on any piece of land without spending a bunch of time on that land and asking 100 questions. Only once I've spent time on that land and I felt into it and I've gotten a lot of historical context. That was one of the things that Arden Anderson always said. You know, a diagnosis is 90% history and physical. You know, you want to go way back and start and understand the dynamics of what has occurred and what the potential is deeply before you make any recommendations. So that's I hope a sufficient non-answer.
I would add one. I would say if you're an animal farmer, definitely go and read up about holistic management or management intensive grazing. I mean, no matter what's gone on in the past, that's going to be helpful.
Yeah, 100%. Set stocking is horrible. Yeah, which is what most people do. You look at the model of nature. Look at the Serengeti. Look at the American West. What is it? Were the animals sitting in one spot constantly, eating it down to a nub? Or were they coming through, eating a bunch, pooping and peeing, stomping it in, coming back 8 months later? The model of nature is the one to replicate. And as long as we're engaging in practices that are not in harmony with the model of nature, it's our damn fault. Yeah, and you want the plants to go through their cycle of growth and reproduction, right? You have to go through that cycle. Yeah.
There's one thing that we haven't specifically talked about actually, which is really interesting because it's just come up in the chat box, which is the question is, does anyone have any experience with guava worm and feijoas? And then someone's replied neem bark and neem spray, which yes, that's an initial solution. But again, if Dan and or Kay, both of you would love to speak to this around shifting the paradigm from thinking that when a plant has disease and pests attacking it, that the Band-Aid solution is, the spray or the chemical or the mainlining fertilizer, but actually the solution is in the soil, so how do we explain
the whole
that
ecosystem in that case?
So this is a massive one, but totally flipped my whole reality on the head 20 years ago, was understanding this key piece of the puzzle. Insects, well, every organism has its own digestive tract. So I like to say to people when I'm teaching a course, like, if there was a bale of hay in here when you walked in, you might have considered sitting on it, but I doubt you would have considered eating it. People say, yeah. And then I say, if you'd walked a cow in here, she probably would have considered eating it, but would not have considered sitting on it. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, so you agree then that a cow can eat hay and you can't? And you're like, yeah. I'm like, so that means that a cow has a different digestive tract than you do, right? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, a larvae doesn't have a liver. They don't have the enzymes in their gut to digest protein. So a plant, as it's going through the process of building complex compounds on the way to tasting good, builds complete protein, which means it's indigestible to larvae. So if a plant's not healthy, if it's not able to build complete protein, it's sickly, it's weak, and nature just sent in the garbage crew to take them out because they're not fit for reproduction. Nature's doing you a service by sending in the larvae to eat your plants because they're not fit for you to eat or for you to feed to your children or for you to sell to your customers. Only when that plant is indigestible to the larvae is it fit for you or for your kids or for your customers to eat. And that applies to bacteria, and that applies to fungi, blights and mildews, and that applies to beetles. Only when you've got red-blooded animals eating your crops is nature telling you you're growing food that's fit for red-blooded animals. If you got insects eating your crops, nature's telling you this is fit for insects. She's talking to you. She's talking to you all day long, and you think she's wrong. I know better. I'm going to control. That's the dominance paradigm. That's the dominance paradigm. There's the mistake. The mistake is not listening and respecting nature as she speaks to you, right? The mistake is thinking that you know better and you're trying to control. We have this completely backwards. We don't understand that our role is to serve and to support and to be in respect and be humble and listen. And she's actually communicating with us. She sends in her fungi people to, because you did a great job growing food for them. Thank you. They will now be able to, flourish and reproduce, but she's telling you this is not fit for your children. You got to listen.
Pests and diseases aren't a sign of a lack of pesticides and fungicides. They're a sign of a lack of health, lack of minerals mostly.
A lack of functional, quality. Yeah, vigor and vitality. Like those plants that are susceptible to infestation and disease are not fit for reproduction. And nature is called the, natural selection. You don't see it happening in nature, right? In nature, you see plants that don't get attacked by insects and disease. And when that happens to your crops, that means you're a bad farmer, right? It means you're not operating in harmony with nature. This is the thing I had to deal with 20 years ago that set me on this trajectory. Was like, for starters, humility. Start with humility. Only when you're willing to say, I don't know, and I'm willing to learn, can you move forward. If you think you've got the answers, then yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, that was my rant.
Fantastic. Yeah, we had a very positive response from that. Everyone's loving the answer.
Okay.
And it is a paradigm shift,
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
it's not, what's wrong, here's a spray for it. Like you said, it's not a lack of, disease and pests. It's
Not
not
a
a
lack
lack
of
of
insecticide.
pesticides. It's lack of health
Deficiency of
in the plant,
insecticide.
and the health starts in the soil, So growing nutrient dense food, which is naturally disease and pest resistant, starts in the soil.
A really good example of that here is when we came here, we're on pumice sand, and the bricks of the grass was 4 when we came here, and the carbon levels was 2. And there were a few old apple trees here, which were 130 years old, and they were full of codlin moth. And we've never done anything about the codlin moth. And we've planted hundreds of apple trees, and we've mulched the apple trees with ramia wood chip, and we've got chickens under them. And we don't even think about the codlin moth. There's so little of it here that we've never done anything, but it's not an environment that they thrive in.
I think all these insects and diseases are there, I call them nature's report card.
Yeah.
And she's telling you whether you're growing fit food for mammals or not. And if you are, she'll send in I don't know if you guys have raccoons, or I don't know what you have here, but
Possums.
possums.
Count the mammals.
Right. I mean, there's yeah. So it's yeah. Anyway, I think I made the point.
Epic. So there are quite a few questions around like soil solutions and what would you suggest and how to start with getting good soil. So I will put an email together for everybody that I'll send out to everybody who's registered for this talk, and we'll link all of Dan's Bionutrient Food Association YouTube channels, the Kōanga Nutrient Dense Growing Your Own Food courses and ebooks and various things. So I'll put all the links for that in the email going out, because we are going to wrap up in a minute. We've actually gone 12 minutes over, but there are
Amber, I just want to say one quick thing.
yes.
So it gets really awkward answering specific questions about things. I think Dan alluded to this before, because really what you have to do, there is a paradigm shift involved, and you need to learn the place to start is to understanding about the principles of science, the laws of nature, the pattern languages, and listening to the land. You've kind of got to start there, and then you can figure out your own answers when you start understanding that. So going to our websites will provide people with a lot of links to all of that.
It's a process. I mean, I remember Arden, was saying, the biggest block is between the ears, right? It's not that nature can't do amazing things in short order. It's that you don't know how to work with her. And that process of unpacking all the wrong thoughts that have been stuck into your head and the wrong ways of looking at nature is a real serious challenge. It doesn't just happen overnight.
Yeah.
Right. It's like decolonizing your mind, and it's a bit of work.
Yeah.
It's a bit of work.
Exactly. Yeah. It is. And I think as a beautiful parting thought as well is, and I've heard you, Kay, talk about this, and in the film, Dan, that you mentioned, The Big Little Farm, is when you start to take those steps, nature gets in behind you.
Yeah.
It's
just make a choice to start.
Yes, we are collaborating, we can start, nature gets in behind you. It's not all on us. She actually knows what she's doing too.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got a page called our Students of Kōanga page, where anyone who's done a workshop with us of any sort can ask questions and share information and with each other, coming from this paradigm, within this paradigm.
Beautiful. This is a great community. Lots of activity in the chat, and thank you both for hosting and organizing. This has been a great fun. So yeah.
Yes. So thank you, Dan, and thank you, Kay, for being here and inspiring us all, and all the decades of knowledge and work and everything that you've both done is so awesome. And if anyone would like to engage with the Bionutrient Food Association website, I will add all those links into the follow-up email, and the same with the Kōanga. And keep your eyes peeled for the Bionutrient meter. That is
Or the
going to...
bricks. How about the bricks campaign?
We'll
Those are
start with the
Yeah.
bricks campaign. Yes.
And
Yeah. So actually, yeah.
$5 a month will get us towards the Bionutrient meter. It's going to take money to do that.
Yes. So
It's got to
Dan,
come
we
bottom up donations. It's the only way this whole thing's going to happen. We're not
Have
a
you got,
company.
oh yes, you've got a bricks campaign going now, haven't you, on your website?
No, we sell the bricks kit, but we haven't actually, we're in the process of building like a little app, a really simple thing
Yeah.
where everybody can upload that data from around the planet.
Yeah.
Idea is get as many groups, organizations, nonprofits, people like around the planet all working on this together, right? If we collectively begin to just like see where good and bad stuff are and tell each other, that action is going to totally how many clothes is the emperor wearing, right? I mean, like if we start checking to see, I think that'll have a massive effect, and we can do that together, bottom up, grassroots, with food we already buy.
Okay, well, I think I understand a bit more about how we can feed into that. So I'll talk to you about that later, and I'll put that out to
Love
all
to
of our
collaborate.
people on our newsletters.
Love
and
to collaborate
membership.
with you on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, be brilliant.
Yeah.
We can have an online bricks party
Yeah.
regularly.
Absolutely. No. All right.
Cool.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody, for
Amber
joining
and
in,
Dan.
and thank you for all your questions and comments and engagement. That was really awesome. And if you are keen to ask more questions, fire them through or reply to the email that goes out with the recording.
All right.
Thank you.
Aho.
Keep up the good work, team. We got this.